Basic portraiture is a staple of the professional and the non-professional alike. And the TTL technology in today's digital cameras, coupled with the technology of the Qflash, makes simple portraits using TTL, well, simple.
Lesson 7. Basic TTL off-camera flash indoors.
One-light portraits are easy to shoot with TTL exposure modes, and the power of the Qflash, controlled by its QTTL technology, makes shooting beautiful one-light portraits fast too. Here's the gear that I've chosen for the shoot today. I'm going to use my good old Quantum Turbo Pack that I've had for years on this shoot because it holds lots of power and it's easy to clip right onto a light stand using the cool little Quantum QBC clamp. Next, I'll mount a Quantum Qflash T5d-R to the top of my light stand using whatever bracket is handy here in the studio. And for my light modifier, I'll be using the Quantum Softbox that pops up and mounts securely on the Qflash. And instead of the typical D-adapter cable to trigger the Qflash, I'm going to use the cool wireless TTL receiver from Quantum called the QNexus. Now this little guy needs no batteries. It has only one dial to set the channel that you want to work on, and is the same receiver for both Nikon and Canon wireless TTL systems. Today I'm shooting a Fuji camera, and it's the same as a Nikon, so I will trigger the QNexus with a Nikon wireless TTL transmitter. I've chosen to use the Nikon SU800, and if I was shooting the Canon camera today, I would choose the Canon STE2 transmitter. With either system, you can just slide the transmitter into the camera's hot shoe, then set the trigger channel and the group to whatever you want to shoot at. I tend to keep all this wireless TTL stuff simple. So I set my transmitters to group A and my channel 1 on all of my TTL wireless gear. Next, we need to tell the QNexus what channel and group to expect to trigger on, which is actually a quick and simple setting. When we snap the QNexus onto the Qflash and power it up, you'll notice that it goes automatically into TTL mode, so there's no need to adjust the mode button on the Qflash because the QNexus has total control at this point. To change from Nikon or Fuji over to the Canon TTL system, just take a look at the color of the blinking LED here. Now if it's red, that means it's waiting to see a trigger from a Canon transmitter. And if it's green, it's waiting for a Nikon or a Fuji system. Simple. I like simple. To change from one to the other, just press and hold the set button for about 3 seconds and it'll flip over to the opposite color. Next, we need to set the group and the channel so that the transmitter and the QNexus can talk to each other. The default group on the QNexus is A, so we're good there. And we can set the channel on the QNexus by just spinning this little dial to match the channel that we've selected on the transmitter, which is number 1. There you are, all set. We'll fire off a test shot and see that the QNexus blinks 8 times, which is its little happy signal. That means that it's fired the flash and has provided a good exposure too. My camera is set to manual exposure mode. I've chosen to shoot at ISO 200. My aperture is f4, and my shutter is set to 1/125th of a second just to use a touch of that room light on the background. I have completed a custom white balance, and I'm using the single area autofocus sensor and the spot metering exposure system. No matrix metering for this type of shooting, it'll really mess you up. I'll bring my model nice and close to the light, and I'll keep my autofocus sensor right on my subject's eyes, and I'll shoot. Now as I shoot and move around and re-zoom, I will move the autofocus sensor around with my right thumb to keep it right on the exact point of focus that I think is important. Now this is just my personal preference, and you can use the single center autofocus and reframe if you need, or use manual focus if you want to too. Wireless TTL systems offer you a lot of creative freedom, of course, but don't get too carried away at first. Start off your wireless TTL shooting by using only one light indoors and get the hang of it before you attempt to shoot with more than one light on your TTL system, or if you feel the need to go ahead and shoot ratio between 2 or more wireless TTL flashes. It can get really complicated really fast. When you're working in a wireless TTL mode, keep in mind that the Canon and the Nikon TTL transmitters and the commander modes built into those cameras and the QNexus receivers all work by using infrared light to pass the exposure data around. That means that if the QNexus cannot see the front of the transmitter spitting out the trigger signal, it will have a hard time triggering. So try your best to keep the QNexus in front of the camera and also out of direct sunlight.